Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big news today, Joe Biden finally has come out with his immigration plan. And, immediately I got some conservatives in my area not overly thrilled with what they've seen. And again, it's one of these weird kind of moments where you go, exactly, what are you looking for? We've got to do something finally on the immigration front that's going to give people a legal status so that we get people out of the shadows. For me, I've said this from the very beginning. We cannot have a society where there are people who are easily exploitable. That is what is bad for all of us. So here to share some thoughts on, what this is, what it looks like, what chance Biden has of getting something push through. I've asked our good friend Hassan Ahmad to come talk with us. Hassan is an immigration attorney and immigration activist. Hassan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, appreciate it. Always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
I guess this is the big news, right? I mean, you've got the president has come out with his idea, his plan. Where is it? What is it? What does it look like to you?
Well, it's as an immigration lawyer and an activist and an advocate, it's an exciting bill to read. It definitely is an exciting bill to read. The text of it just dropped at 1:00 today, and I spent some time reading a summary of it that had been made available to me last night. I think I've got a pretty good grasp of what it is, and the main thing is that it provides it's different pathways, but a pathway to earn citizenship for the majority of the 11 million plus undocumented individuals in the United States. Now, how they get there, it varies. It depends on what status they have. It depends on how long they've been here. It perhaps might depend on whether they already have family that's petitioned for them. But that's the main new pathway that exists for people to be able to go. But the bill goes a lot further than that. It also changes the way that immigration numbers and visa numbers are counted throughout the world, and does so in a way that promotes family unity. It changes the definitions and creates more pathways to judicial review, so that if something goes wrong, that there is more redress in the courts.
Right.
It reforms to a certain extent the immigration court system, which, as we know, is completely and horridly backlogged right now. And it has an entire 4-year strategy of outreach to Central America and Central American countries in particular to promote safer refugee resettlement while respecting the rights of refugees. In some places, it doesn't perhaps go far enough. I would not consider this to be a radical bill, but it is a starting point. It is a starting point, and somebody needs to throw down and say, all right, this is where we are. This is where we can start from. Where it goes from here, obviously there's several uphill battles, but I'm glad that at least the conversation can begin.
So we're here in this moment. I want to go back and kind of compare because you said a second ago, this isn't radical. And, a lot of the people that I've gotten initial response from, this is the end. This is the end of it. We're flinging the doors open, Hassan, and everybody's going to come. They're going to be massive caravans. It's the end of society as we know it. And I'm curious, if how far you push back on that.
You know what? I look at that and I say, well, that's just sort of emblematic of how far off course our discourse on immigration has gotten. I mean, really what we're talking about here is giving people a fighting chance and looking at the fact that, okay, fine, we have a large undocumented population. We have a huge, issue going on at the border. There are lots of people trying to flee persecution. Yes, obviously you have to manage it, but if we consider the fact that building a wall and throwing up a wall and keeping as many people out as possible, and for those that are in, to try to create pathways that are as fraught with pitfalls as possible, That's not a commonsensical approach, right? What we're talking about is give people a chance, let people leave, let people come in, let people go back and forth. And I think what's significant about this bill is that it reimagines, rethinks the border as not a wall with a door in it that might be open and shut, or borders that can be just open and shut like some binary thing, but sees the border as a tool. And that's the way a border should be. If you really want to talk about securing our border, right, then maybe it makes sense to use the border as a tool wisely, so that it creates prosperity on both sides of it, allowing goods, ideas, services, people to cross back and forth. And the very same people who are now saying that it's the end of civilization as we know it are the same ones that have been pushing forth this enforcement-only narrative for the past 30 years, right? And this is where it's gotten us. Okay, if there's a crisis on the border, if there's a problem with 11 million plus undocumented people in the country with no pathway and living as a permanent underclass, it's their fault. They're the ones that did it.
Yep.
They're the ones that caused for these policies. And now they want to propose a solution to do more of that which created the problem in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it makes sense to me.
Let's try something different.
It makes sense to me if your goal is to have an underclass of people who are exploitable and vulnerable, that business interests can pick and choose when they use and when they throw it and discard and throw aside. If that's your interest, mission accomplished. And the reason that, as a union guy, why I think it's so important that we don't have people in the shadows is that's what tears down our conditions.
Exactly.
I've said a million times, the contract that I have in front of me, it guarantees workers a certain wage, certain conditions, certain benefits, and we don't want people who are exploitable who will go below that. So for me, bringing people out of the shadows, and if it means a pathway to citizenship or guest worker programs or things like that, we should be doing that. But what do you say to the person, Hassan, who goes, we're only so capable of taking so many people? And we can't fling the doors open and do what you've said and just have a kind of a border that people go back and forth over. What's the answer to that?
I mean, I think the answer to that is simply that we're not talking about, look, I've been representing people as an immigration attorney for almost 20 years. And every single refugee or asylum seeker that I've ever spoken to, and I've been, in Mexico doing it on that side of the border and also on this side of the border, for many years. Nobody ever chooses never to be able to go home again. Right. And what's happened here is we've created a system that makes it impossible for people to flee. And if they somehow are able to make it in, then they wind up going into this black hole and becoming a permanent underclass where they're exploitable and do in fact get exploited. And then they can't leave unless it's through on a flight by ICE, right? Because if they leave, they're never going to be allowed to come back, and they lose their everything that they've worked for inside the United States, and that includes paying taxes. So whatever your take is on it, if you think of the border as a tool to create prosperity and look at our neighbors as really our neighbors, and let's which was the position of the Republican Party as recently as 1980, and even beyond, we can create the prosperity that will naturally secure our border.
That's a good point.
We can do that if we do things in a different way.
Right. You went back to the Reagan era, and the last, it's my understanding that's the last time we had real immigration legislation was during the Reagan era, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that was the last amnesty. And what happened in 1986 when 4 million people were their status was legalized, it led to so many immigrants being able to come in, being able to contribute, become a part of our society, become citizens, full participants in civic life, etc. But it really wasn't until 1990 and then 1996 when these enforcement-only techniques and policies started to come forth, that we started to see the problem get worse and worse and worse. And people were stuck without any way of normalizing their status, of fixing the problem or getting in a line to wait in. And if you wait 25 or 30 years, of course it's going to be a big problem. And when you get used to to thinking of things from a enforcement only perspective, then any sort of policy that provides some sort of relief to these immigrant communities is going to seem radical, but it's not really. Take a step back and think about it. We're talking about giving people a chance. Why is that a bad thing? Why is amnesty a bad word? We're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about earning a path to citizenship, making people go through the hoops and register themselves so that they can gain that level of protection so we know who they are.
Well, because I won the birth lottery and you're a criminal. That's why.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, if we can't get past that, then that's the reason why we're having these inane conversations. Right. This honestly should not be a big deal. And I think if there's one thing, and I know we want to talk a little bit later about what chance the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 has to actually pass, getting into the nitty-gritty of the politics of it. But I would hope that whatever the negotiation is at the table, whatever the negotiation is, however this falls out, whether it's split up into 15 or 20 or 50 different bills or goes through as is or as amended, I just hope that we can all agree that hatred and xenophobia and white supremacy should not have a place at this table.
But unfortunately, that's what's going to happen. Right. Because the people who are going to come to this country are going to be from places that have extremely high poverty, places that are extremely desperate, and places that you could argue that corporate America has been exploiting for generations. And I'll be honest, if I'm on the southern end of the border and I'm looking across that border as a way to feed my children, there's going to be virtually nothing to stop me from getting here. And that's the one reality I don't think most people have put themselves in, that if it were me, there's no question I would be fighting to get here.
Well, I think there's no overnight solutions either. And I think that's one of the reasons why, at least the beginning of a 4-year strategic plan or outreach to address the root causes of migration, not looking at migration itself as a problem in and of itself, but at least making it so that people don't feel forcibly, so that people are not forcibly displaced. I mean, that's a huge thing, right? It's the right question to ask. It's the right path to travel down. And it's not going to I think, lead or result in a magic solution overnight. But it is the right pathway to go on.
Yeah. So let's talk about the political possibilities, because I saw it this morning. I looked it over, and I'm going, this seems to be a smart strategic plan. With a lot of things in that are good, a lot of things in it maybe could be better, but it's a starting point. And then I got to the end, and I'm like, to be honest, who am I kidding? It's 2021. Nothing's getting done. I'm curious. Do you share my dismay that this is probably dead on arrival?
I always like to try to look at the bright side of things, and I don't want cynicism, our own political cynicism or jadedness, to make us lose the battle before we even start it. So I prefer to look at this as round one. That's what I'm looking at this as. I mean, Biden himself has signaled that he's willing, that he's not going to foreclose any other possibility, that he's going to be flexible on it, and maybe it does make sense to go. And I'll say this as a practitioner, there's portions of the bill, like the V visa, for example, which allows people stuck in interminable family backlogs to be able to wait out their wait inside the United States with their families, or repealing the 3 and 10 year bars. These are nitty-gritty legal points. But even these few things would help millions of people and get us a good portion of the way there, right? And maybe that's what the answer is to do this piecemeal and strategically and methodically and sequentially, as opposed to one big in one big fell swoop. Yeah. But we need to reset. And that's kind of what I see this as. This is a big Control-Alt-Delete, saying, all right, look, the last 4 years, we've seen the result of these hate groups and the enforcement-only approach. We've seen it come to fruition. This is the mess that it led to. Clearly, whatever they were doing, whatever they were saying, it wasn't working. Let's stop listening to them. Let's hit Control-Alt-Delete. And let's have a new conversation. And this is round one of that new conversation.
No, and look, you say it's round one. This is like round 6. I mean, we've been going through this. We've been going through this for a while, because there was a comprehensive plan that some thought possibly could have passed during the Bush years. And
in 07 and 13. Yeah, you're right. But I guess it's a little different now that things like family separation, children in cages, the migrant protection protocols, which I call the migrant persecution protocols, the Muslim ban, TPSD designation, and everything that we've seen over the last 4 years has brought the natural results of those policies front and center. They are much more, I think, on the minds of ordinary Americans than they were 7 years ago or 12 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that we have a political system so broken that we can't solve what are some of our big problems, and this immigration situation is a big problem. And the longer that we have political leaders who do nothing, the more divisive, the more heat is going to be around this issue, which is why I guess they're never going to. I fear they're never going to deal with it.
Right. Well, I think I always look at it. I draw inspiration from two things. One is that I firmly believe the two ingredients of social change are time and pressure. It's the only two things that have ever changed anything. And the second thing is as Mahatma Gandhi said, full effort is full victory. That's where the victory actually is as long as we're making the best effort we can and continue pushing. That really is where the victory is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Last thing, as I was looking through some of it, one of the things that I've talked about for a while is the fact that, during 2010, during the Tea Party revolution, one of the things that they stopped doing was pursuing to stop giving foreign aid. I'm a big fan of helping people in their communities stay in their places, make places more livable. Is there anything in this that would help that kind of outreach? So people don't, because look, I've met people from other countries who said, look, I came here because I had to. Is there a way we make things that are better for people to stay home?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there are outreach, and efforts on both sides. In other words, in overseas, in other countries, and here in the United States. And I think that's part of what makes the bill significant, is that part of the outreach, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but getting international, donors to help support efforts to increase transparency in many of these countries and focus on like anti-gang and anti-organized crime initiatives, increasing access to counsel, access to justice in many of these countries. Again, these are not solutions that are going to, we're not going to see them flower overnight, but the seeds have to be planted. And here in the United States, absolutely, there's an entire section of the bill devoted to new American integration, right? And being able to give vocational training to people and understanding the importance of adult education, English skills, things like that people are going to need to be able to survive. It's always boggled my mind that we're willing to spend 10 times the amount of money detaining and deporting people, whereas if we spent a fraction of that on empowering them, you'd see them fly.
Yeah, no, it is what it is. But Hassan, I appreciate you taking some time and explaining it a little bit to us. I'm sure we'll be talking about this on into the future.
Absolutely. Anytime, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. I appreciate the time. Hassan Ahmad, immigration attorney and advocate. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.